All right, welcome. And it is another Tuesday night. We're here live and ready for questions, comments. Don't hesitate to get involved tonight. Tonight's going to be a current affairs type of podcast. And obviously, the political arena has drastically shifted over the last month. And, President Trump got in office and immediately decisions from day one, decision. He's making these decisions, executive order. And you could safely say that our country is in a legitimate shakeup right now. There are so many things that are happening. I mean, it's like literally heads are literally rolling. It's just, people are being fired. People are being given the option to leave. People are being arrested and sent out of the country. I mean, this is like decisions are being made. And the reason why that's significant and why I chose to talk about it tonight is because whether you believe or agree with the things and decisions that Trump is making, the truth is Donald Trump is a very prominent leader. He's a very strong leader. And like I said, whether you agree with him or you don't, doesn't matter. He's a very clearly defined leader. And the Bible shows us kind of an interesting progression of leadership. It says in a few different scriptures that God is the one that sets up leadership, governments, all that stuff. He's the one that's in charge of this. And so whether in the church or in the unchurched environment, leadership is clearly in God's control. And so I think it's a good time right now because it's relevant to talk about the place of leadership and what real leadership is supposed to be. And so the main question is, God made man with a certain level of autonomy. We can make our own decisions. This whole idea of free will and God letting people make their decisions, whether good or bad, right or wrong. He lets people go down the road they choose. But God also made man to lead and be led. And what's interesting about this progression of leadership in the Bible is at one point you had man being led directly by God. Then you had men leading other men because God was leading through them, and the prophets. And then you had a moment in time where the children of Israel, who were originally being led by God, decided we want a man to lead us. We want a king like the other nations. And this was, different than what had happened before. So let's just kind of just spend the first few minutes talking about the history of leadership, from a biblical perspective, obviously. But what is the difference between what the children of Israel chose and what God had intended before that?
In terms of
leadership.
Okay, so I think the first thing that comes to my mind that I think needs to be considered is that God has always been the sovereign leader, and that has never changed. What has changed is God giving leaders to those who don't want to follow him. That's a key point. That's a very key point. Because the first thought that jumped into my mind when you started talking about the idea of leaders is if you read the Bible carefully, or at least if you've read it a lot and you're paying attention, you will know that God never appointed a bad leader. He never appointed a bad leader. He appointed good people. They went bad while leading, but it didn't start off that way. But that's always been the case because that was Adam.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. I mentioned to you before the podcast, I'm listening to Jordan Peterson's latest book, and he makes this interesting because it's the whole thing. It's funny. I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, here's a preacher who's not a Christian. How the irony of it, because he's a good one, he's a good preacher. He talks about Adam and Eve and the fall, and from a as he does, his clinical standpoint of but his insight, it was very interesting to me, because it's what the Bible says in the New Testament, because the Bible says, which is funny, because it's an argument that many people have, is women shouldn't be, women are oppressed by the Bible, that kind of thinking, which isn't true. Women are we have stories of women being oppressed in the Bible, but it is not God's will for women to be oppressed in the Bible. And in fact, when Jesus, who is God, came to the earth, he promoted women, and he gave dignity to women. We read some of the stories of women doing things that other women would be ashamed of, but welcome to the male world. How many men do things, and how many chapters in the Bible are there of men who do shameful things that are embarrassing to men? But that doesn't make us change how we feel about our role.
Yeah.
And that's where the snag is, because Eve, he talks about it from the standpoint of Eve being caring, and that this was the sort of inner focal point, that he brings out, is the idea is that because both of them were subject to pride, that both of them, pride was at the root of it, but pride for Eve was, I can incorporate all these things. So from the caring standpoint is that I can incorporate everything. Even the forbidden can be incorporated into my life, because I have the ability to be caring about everything, that I can even the ways he put it was basically even caring for a poisonous snake. And that is, there's a real truth in that idea, because she's only looking at it from the standpoint of the benefits. Yeah. Of the forbidden. She's not looking at the forbidden and why it's forbidden and why she should honor that. It's no, can I embrace this? It's good for food, it's a desires to make one wise. So there's a decision that's made there, and you think, are we ever going to get to the idea of leadership? Well, that's the whole idea. That's the whole point of the problems of leadership, is because Adam was the first one created, but Eve was supposed to be his partner in leadership. They were supposed to be the partner in the leadership of mankind. That was the whole idea. God said, you're going to tend the garden, you're going to be in charge of structure, and then now this, some of this, yes, is what Jordan Peterson said, but now I'm just really going after what God did in the Bible. It's just very clear in the Bible. And then he said to the woman, he said, you're in charge of nurture. So man is in charge of nature, the woman is in charge of nurture, and they're compatible with each other. And but the problem and the fall of that was, and this does go back to what directly Jordan Peterson said, was overreaching. And that's always what happens in leadership. That's always the problem in leadership, is there's always that danger of overreaching. And that's what happened with Adam and Eve, is they're overreaching. Same thing with Saul. King Saul he was elected. He was very, or chosen by God. He was very a humble man, very, very insecure. He didn't want to become king. When they came to make him king, he was hiding. It wasn't a thing where he really wanted to be a king. But then once he became a king and he was able to begin to embrace the idea of being king, one of the first things we read is he's run out and made a statue of himself. And so it's like, how did you go from that to that? Well, overreaching. You become comfortable with where you are, and okay, well, I'm gonna go here now, and so that's always the snag when it comes to the issues of leadership. And so that was, with before that is Samuel, and Samuel. He's leading. He's the leader, but he's leading as a prophet. He's leading as a representative of God. He's not the one. He's not making all these decisions. And the reason for that is because his sons are not not following Samuel. And so it's like, Samuel, you're going to die, and we're going to be left, to figure things out for ourselves. We need a leader. And he's like, no, God will lead you. God will do. No. We can't have that, because what if the people that are supposed to be in the place of God, which would be Samuel's sons, what if they blow it? And they're not listening to God? Then we're all screwed. And so we need a king who's here, and somebody who we can hold accountable for when things aren't going the way that they need to go. And so that gives us a sort of foundation for how leadership worked. Is God chose, because Saul was one of those choices, just like the rest of it. So there's a consistency in God's leadership choices. That's the thing I want you to see, is that there's a consistency in leadership choices, that God always chooses good leaders. He never chooses bad leaders from the beginning. He chooses good leaders. And so that becomes the basis of everything. So anybody who becomes a leader, we should understand this, that everybody who becomes a leader, you need to understand that there are attributes within that individual of leadership. Otherwise, they would never become leader. And it doesn't matter if, but what about these guys, that they claw their way to the top and this and that and the other thing. Well, clawing your way to the top and trying to amass power to yourself, you still have to play the leadership game. You don't just come in and, one guy doesn't rise up. You think about just something like an overthrow or a coup, even a bad one, or a mutiny on a ship. Somebody is the leader of the men who rebel.
Right.
And where did he come from? He's a leader. He is a leader, and he has the attributes of a leader. So he is a good leader, motivated incorrectly. And so the reason why I think that that's so important to have as a foundation is because then it will help you to not be jaundiced or unnecessarily prejudice against leadership.
Right.
So you see somebody who's a leader and you don't like their character, or you don't, you're looking at something somewhat subjective. I don't like this person, or maybe a lot of people don't like this person. And the reason is because he has a personality, or she has a personality that you disagree with, but that doesn't mean that person doesn't have the attributes of leadership. And what I'm getting at is, in the broader perspective, is that doesn't mean that God didn't put them there. And so that's an important element, I think, to understand, is that if you're in a situation to where you have a leader over you, wisdom dictates that there's a reason why that person is a leader over you, is because they have attributes that you don't. And that's it, and you may not like their flaws, but you cannot. Well, you can, but it's unwise to try to steal their attributes, their leadership attributes from them. And, having been on both sides of that fence, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to despise somebody who's a leader, over me. But over the years, I've come to realize that a lot of the reasons for that is simply because I'm under them, and I don't want them to be over me. Is really what it comes down to, is I just simply don't want them over me. And so I think it's important for us to, like I said, have that as a foundation, that when we're talking about the issue of leadership in general, that God appoints leadership. All leadership is appointed by God. It's not just some. All leadership is appointed by God. God has given people certain gifting and certain ability to be able to lead. And so leaders are leaders. It's character and development and all those kinds of things are there. But a leader doesn't decide one day, okay, I'm the leader. There has to be some qualities that ingratiate them into leadership.
Okay, so we were actually talking about this before before the podcast, and talking about how people feel about their boss, and and honestly, that part of the conversation was very unrelated to what I was going to talk about tonight, but from a different angle anyway, because in the workplace, this is just a very common, everybody can kind of relate to this idea, but it is very common in the workplace for people to have a problem with their boss. And I was talking about how I've worked in quite a few different, under quite a few different variations of leader or boss, and the one in charge had this personality and this work ethic and had this level of people skills, and then I've had literally like the polar opposite of that in every way, and some mixtures in between. And so it's funny because if you think about this stuff, just thinking people in general, and we're talking about leadership in general, but I'm using examples in the Bible. But in 1 Corinthians, Paul writes this letter to a church, a prominent church, that he started and then leaves. A man named Apollos takes over the leadership of that church, or at least the in-person leadership of that church. And there becomes a dissension. He literally uses the word dissension among the people that are being led about who their leader is. I'm of Paul. I am a follower of Apollos. And so now there are disagreements happening among the ranks about what they should do or what direction they should go because of who their leader is. No, I do it this way because that's my leader, and I do it this way because that's my leader, and so there's this dissension. And Paul actually says this: for since there is jealousy and dissension among you, are you not worldly? And so there's this way that clearly this shouldn't be operating in a church, but it is. And so what is the issue in the church and outside the church when it comes to a leader, and why does there seem to be often a divide of people? I agree with this guy, and other people I don't.
Well, the reason why Paul calls it worldly, it's lower nature stuff. This is our animalistic nature at its worst. Because the truth of the matter is that usually people that go so far as to say, this person, I don't like them, but more than that, they don't deserve to be my boss. If we would be honest, what we really want is we want to be the boss, or we want somebody like us to be the boss. And in either case, neither one is qualified. Because if you were, or somebody like you were, they would be the boss. It's not that there's a lack of people signing up to be a leader. It's not like there's only 5 and there's 100 positions. And so you just have to put these people in there. No, that's not the case. Is these people showed qualities of leadership, and the people like you, that think like you, act like you, they were disqualified from becoming, from taking that position. And that's why that didn't happen, because they were disqualified. Whether it's you directly, because you applied and failed to meet the qualifications, or somebody like you applied and failed to meet the qualifications. In either case. And the reason, these are things that I'm kind of, building a foundation, because something I learned over the years, is... Honestly, even when I was young, in my 20s, I never really had a problem with my boss, because they were my boss. I never did really understand taking things that far. It's one thing to not like somebody. It's another thing to think that they are unworthy of being a boss. It's that to me just went too far in my thinking, because it was like, you're not the boss. And you don't even have a say in this matter, because it has nothing to do with you. And yet here you are, you've, in your mind, you're a legend in your own mind. You've made yourself the boss of everybody, and the self-appointed boss. You're the boss that is the boss of everybody, but nobody's listening to you. And there's no need to go there. Having conflict with somebody is one thing, and having to work out the conflict. But when you take it to the point of where you don't think that person should any longer be a boss, that's just pride. because you're not qualified to make that choice. You aren't the one sitting on the board of directors. You're not the one sitting in the interview office making these decisions. And so your opinion doesn't, it's not just that your opinion doesn't matter. Your opinion is uneducated because you don't know what's required for that position. You just know you don't like that person, and so therefore they shouldn't be a leader. And that's why. And the truth is, Paul talked about the idea of jealousy. Is that really is what it is? Is it's something in our heart of hearts often is that we want to be the one treating people like they are.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't like the way that they're treating people. It's that we want to be there so we can treat people like that. Or we have some fantasy idea that we're going to get if we could get into that position, that we would actually change. We would come out of our cocoon a beautiful butterfly. That would be the perfect leader, even though we're an ugly caterpillar right now. That's how we think. Is nobody thinks, if I was doing this job with my skill set, with my understanding who I am and the way things are right now, I would do a far better job than them. We don't consciously, we might try to deceive ourselves into believing that's the case. But the truth of the matter is we don't see ourselves as the boss. We actually see somebody else as the boss. Whether that's us transformed out of our cocoon experience or somebody else, we just see somebody else that's better, than what we think of this person. And so I think that's a real important factor to keep in mind, when talking about these kinds
Sounds
of
like
things.
this.
That's why people complain about their bosses.
Yeah. So it sounds like the mindset's quite multifaceted. there are a lot of different angles.
Well, yeah, that's life. Life. I remember somebody. I shared it before on another podcast, but I remember somebody saying, you categorize people as if I'm, narrowing people down, and they, you only fit in this category, and that's not the issue. It's there's, we all can be categorized. There's no such thing as an individual that can't fit in one or more categories of life. But that's the issue is that when it comes to these kinds of things, those kinds of responses come out of that kind of category. So people who don't like their boss, they fit into a handful of categories that are things like jealousy, worldliness, those kinds of things. That's why that happens, because it is possible, and I've done it for a long time, of have a boss that, I don't, personality-wise, I don't really like, and I may be even more disciplined than they are. I may even be more aware of what's going on. I may be more moral than they are. There can be all those kinds of factors. But I can still work for them, and I can take orders from them without having to do it my way. I can just say, this is what you want done, and if the situation presents itself, it'll be okay. Well, what do you think about this? And it's like, yeah, no, I thought about that, but I want to do it this way. Okay, well, we're done. I'm going to do it that way. But it's not a thing of, I'm just sorry, unless it's something flat out immoral. I'm not gonna do something like that. If I had bosses that, told me to lie, just lie to the customer and tell them this, and I said, yeah, I'm sorry, but when it comes to that kind of a thing, you're going to have to call them. I'm not going to do that. I don't give them a lecture on, honesty.
Yeah.
I may at some point at a personal level, as a Christian, trying to encourage people to become Christians, but when it comes to the idea of how he wants to run his business, if you want to run your business that way, that's up to you, but I can't do those things. I can't do that. But I will still work for you, but I'm not going to cater to that. And I might suggest that you come up with another way of doing things, because lying doesn't ever work.
Yeah. So we are talking about anarchy versus hierarchy here, and that's the title of the topic. The topic title is hierarchy or anarchy.
Yeah.
And so a hierarchy is simple definition. This is just from ChatGPT. Is individuals, groups, or entities that are ranked according to levels of authority, status, or importance. Hierarchy is basically just levels of leadership. You can say it that way. And so quick question is, what is the place of leadership? What is a leader supposed to be?
Well, without leadership,
No. Don't answer that. That's the next question. Don't say without leadership. Answer what leadership is supposed to be, not how it benefits.
Okay. So leadership provides direction. That's the point of leadership. Direction and order are probably right off the top of my head, those two will be probably the main things. Is that they bring direction and order.
Give me an example. Super arbitrary, but give me an example of leaders providing direction.
I don't know if I can divorce that from order because they both work hand in hand. But you'll have, having a goal, some kind of goal or goals, or series of goals to meet those goals. So the point and the purpose of a leader is to bring those under him to some place of achievement of some kind of goal, some kind of end result.
Okay. And so, give me an example. If we were to focus on order, give me an example of a situation where the leader is having to get involved to either restore or maintain order because there's a circumstance where order is at risk. Like, what would be a scenario in which that would work?
Conflict within the ranks.
Okay.
People being in conflict with each other. That's never productive. You can't have that kind of thing, and so the leader will have to get involved in that and make decisions to alleviate that. Sometimes it could be something as simple as, okay, hey, listen, guys, you need to get together, or, okay, only one of you can stay. Which one of you wants to leave?
So now going the direction, so we've kind of established, we could say a foundation for leadership, a foundation for the understanding of leadership, the foundation for people's viewpoints towards leadership, and then, what leadership is supposed to establish. And we understand that's, so as somebody under a leader, we understand that's, okay, this is what a leader is doing, supposed to be doing. There's a word that I came across when I was studying for this. It's the word acephalus. Sounds like an STD, but it's not. It literally means without a head, and it's a nifty way to describe an organization or people that doesn't have a leader. There's another word that we are very familiar with, and as a part of the title, is the word anarchic or anarchy.
Yeah.
That literally means there's actually a few different definitions. Some of them are kind of passive and almost positive.
Yeah.
Things like autonomy falls under this definition. So anarchy can mean a whole bunch of different things, but at its base understanding, it's the lacking of governance and or order.
Yeah.
So what in leadership, what is the problem with not having leadership?
Okay. Yeah, so that's even if you were to try to work out the most utopian setting, and I was going to say Brave New World points this out, but I don't really. That's kind of pushing it. But because that was the kind of idea of the book. But it's funny because those what was the other one? The other complementary book. There's Brave New World, and then the whole Big Brother thing. What the heck?
Not 1984.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, not 1984. Oh, maybe that is what it's called. But yes, it's a date. But anyway, that might be it. But anyway, so that whole idea, of extreme rigid, leadership structure, very, or very calm, casual, just living for pleasure thing. The outcome, the outcome, even in the most utopian of environments, the outcome is hedonism. It doesn't, you can't produce anything. You can't, that's the only word that's coming to my mind, but I want something more than that. You can't achieve. I mean, there's no achievement without leadership. Because you have to come out from somebody somewhere has to come out from among the pack in order to move forward. Because the pack, by definition, is inert. It's not going anywhere.
Sorry, this is a stupid question, but can you just define inert for me? I've heard
Going
the
nowhere.
word
Yeah,
okay,
going nowhere.
yeah.
Going nowhere. Just the
Inertia.
idea
Okay,
of
that's-
just
yeah, inertia was the word I was
just
looking for.
not
Okay.
it's not it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
there. It's
yeah.
just a blob of nothing. That's that's when everybody gets along and everybody's at the same level. That's what you have. Nothing important. There's nothing important going on. It's you could all walk away from that and go do something else. It would
Okay, let me just
Not
interject
matter.
a question there, because I could ask the question, what's wrong with that? But
yeah.
hold on.
Yeah, it's
But-
not it's a valid question.
Okay. Let me ask that
It's a valid
question.
question.
After I ask this question. No, I'll reverse that. Okay, so let me ask that question first. I'll ask the next question afterwards. So what is wrong with that?
Not achieving anything. We only have a very limited amount of time on this planet, and just kind of rolling along year after year. It's not. It will be more and more difficult to find reasons to stay alive because
Okay.
you have no purpose, and if you have no purpose, then you're gonna have a great difficulty coming up with reasons to get out of bed in the morning.
Okay, next question. Is that okay? We're this is super hypothetical, but it establishes the reality of leadership, or I should say, supports it. But is that just again theoretically? Let's just think theoretically. Is that possible?
Is what possible?
Is that state
What?
Is it possible for people to just exist at a base level?
No, and there's a very clear reason why, is because we have not evolved. We were created, and it would go against the nature of who we are to do that. We were created to achieve. There's something in us. It's inherent in us to achieve. Everybody. There's no such thing as somebody who doesn't want to achieve. There are people who have lost the desire to achieve, but that doesn't mean they didn't have it in the first place. They did have it, and there's nobody who was born, homeless, and not doing, people do that because they give up. They give up in the fight of life, the battle of life becomes too much for them, and they just surrender. But the problem is they've got to keep living, and that's why people like that lose their ability to be able to function in society. What would make somebody, just because they don't have a place to live, go to the bathroom in public, in front of everybody? What would make somebody do that? They've lost their dignity, and the reason they've lost their dignity is because they aren't achieving anything. What's there to have dignity for? I'm a dog. What dogs go to the bathroom out publicly in front of everybody. And I'm that's just all I am, is a dog. But they weren't created to be like that. And so you lose touch with reality. You can't continue to function in the context of normalcy when that happens. And so you have to achieve. Achieving is a necessity in life. You have to achieve.
Okay, so now here's the kind of crux of this whole thing, is that when it comes to this issue of trying to go a direction or trying to achieve, because like you said, we're created, does it matter what we're trying to achieve? in the grand scheme of our life.
Yeah, not so much. Yeah, not so much, although some endeavors are more worthy than others, and therefore greater sense of self-fulfillment, so, but, that I would say that definitely there needs to be at the lowest level the desire to achieve something, and then at that level, which is what I wanted to say before I forget it, at that level you are a leader. That's all there is to it, because you're going to take on responsibility for a thing, and in order for there to be some kind of achievement, you cannot achieve by letting somebody do everything for you. You have to do something for yourself, and in doing something for yourself, you have to take charge. And so obviously the only way you can take charge is if you have some ability to be a leader. You may not have the ability to lead 100 people or even 5 people, but you do always have the ability to lead yourself, and to decide. It's funny because even I have more. I think it's harder to lead yourself than it is to lead people, because there are times where I have the choice to do something that has nothing to do with people. It just has to do with me and decisions that I want to make, and I really have a very hard time with that. But when it has to do with making a decision that has to do with other people, it's much easier to make those decisions. It's much easier when it's the well-being or benefit of other people. It's much easier to make
Why?
those kinds. Well, because the outcome is greater. So the necessity of making the right choice becomes more important. And that's where the problem lies. And you might think, some people might be listening to that and think, I'm just completely the opposite of this. I just freeze in every kind of major decision I make in life. Well, it's probably because you aren't leading other people, and so you don't have anything to compare it to. But when you are actually leading other people, like for example, mother gets into she might be wrestling with alcoholism and drug abuse and everything else. But when she gets into a car accident and she's got kids in the back seat, she knows exactly what to do. Make sure the kids are safe. I mean, immediately, that's just going to happen. She's going to make that choice, and she's not going to sit there and go, oh, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? The other thing. But if you're sitting inside of a car and you've gone into a lake and the car's filling up with water, and you have time to think about, what should I do? Should I open the window? Well, what if I open the window and more water comes in? It's like, you're going to have a hard time making that kind of decision. It's like, I've either got to get out of the car now, with where I am, or wait and then see if it gets easier to get out, or what, I don't know, hoping something will happen. But when kids are involved in it, it's like, I got to get out of here right now, because I'm not going to have enough time to be able to rescue my children the farther down this car's going. And so it's not a perfect example of what I'm talking about, but it does communicate the reality that when it's just about you personally, it's much harder to make choices, leadership choices, because it's like, what if this is the wrong choice? Because you only have you to reference off of. But when there are other people involved, and you say, well, I can make this choice, or I can make this choice, and it's much clearer. The outcome of whether it's going to help or hinder people in general it's much clearer, when it comes right down to it. Like life, for some reason, life throws choices at us that are not as important. The outcome of them and the way we are created, it's harder to make the right choice in that kind of situation, because we're not sure how it's all going to play out. But when it comes to other people, it seems to be that there's a lot. The path is more clear. I don't know that I have a way of actually nailing all that down. But if you think about it, you'll see that it's true. And so it's more of a truism than a. I can't sit here and think, well, what about if you had to make this decision between this, that, and the other thing? Well, the bottom line is you probably would see if it's a decision that could go both ways. You'd probably think it doesn't matter. It's an unimportant decision, And so whatever you do in that situation is probably not going to be. But for some reason, when it comes down to ourselves, and we have to make a choice about something. There's something inside of us that really does get upset about making choices about ourselves, and I can't describe why that is. Talk to Jordan Peterson, maybe he could tell you.
Try to get a hold of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, see if you
Let me
can.
know if you're successful, by the way. I've tried.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question that came in. It's actually a very good question for this moment. Is can leadership qualities be cultivated, or is it only a natural occurrence? And I'll actually add to that question how much of one
Yeah.
versus the other.
Well, I kind of
is.
mentioned that we all have sort of leadership raw material, leadership raw material. We all do, because we all are leaders of some degree. We are definitely, at the very least, leaders of the. We are leaders of this planet. And I can hear the tree huggers out there going, no, no. We are the leaders of this planet. We've been put in charge of this planet. And so we are leaders. Every one of us is called to respect, cultivate, and subdue our planet. And subdue meaning bring order is really what that's talking about. And that's, we talked about, as one of the attributes of leadership, bringing order.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have a bottom, Then on top of that is calling. Calling to leadership. We have callings in life to leadership. Some of those callings are gender. They're male and female. Some of them are parental. Some of them are relational. Some of them are employment. We have all these different things, and our gifting. It isn't like we all start with the same amount of gifting. I'm not saying that, but we all have some measure of gifting, and that can be cultivated. I think anybody can cultivate it. I think it is the difference between, if I wanted to learn how to be a professional goalie in soccer, it would be much harder for me than it would be for the likes of a professional goalie who is from teenage years wanted to be a goalie. Mm-hmm. There's more going on there than just simply the cultivating of skills.
Learned skill, yeah.
Yeah, so there is an element of calling, personal calling, God calling, our creation calling, that God has, the classic line many Christians say to non-Christians: God has a plan for your life, and that's true. We weren't created without purpose. We were created with purpose, and the fulfillment of that purpose is the ultimate fulfillment, in life. And so everybody has that, and everybody will have some measure of leadership along the way. But how that will equate out will be different for different people. And so not everybody's going to become a particular type of leader.
Okay, so thinking about the issue of I use this because you talked a little bit about fulfillment, and actually you mentioned it a little bit before the podcast as well, and it reminded me of this quote, so I just added it in, this quote from a book called The Self-Aware Leader. And he says, if you are not I actually mentioned this the other day.
Yeah.
But he says, if you are not doing something that makes a difference, doesn't add value to people, you will never be satisfied. And he actually goes on to say that there are two types of people. There are those who look to make impact. There are those who look to serve themselves.
Yeah.
Who are the better leaders?
Yeah. Well, it's like
who are the better followers?
I mentioned, we talked about that in the beginning of the podcast. I talked about how there are two types of people in the world, that there are people who they're lottery people. Mm-hmm. And they are people who, everything is a lottery. If I throw myself at this, maybe I'll hit big, and so everything they do in life, they're throwing themselves at things. And sometimes they get a winning ticket, and they get $5. Other times but more often than not, they lose. They just lose and just looking forward to the next lottery and live their entire lives with the idea that one day I'm going to hit it big. But then there's the other type of person, and they're the type of people that actually invest in things. And so they're not just throwing everything they have at some particular thing. They're investing in things and seeing, is it bringing a return? And if it's bringing a return, great. Well, then I can invest more into it. But if it's not, well, I can cut my losses without having too much a negative impact in my life. And that those two groups of people are what you just described, are the ones who are investing in other people, or the ones that are throwing themselves at things because of they're looking to promote self. It's all about my happiness, and so that's it. Because I again, like what I mentioned before the podcast, is that the idea of the reason why Saturday at breakfast there was all the mocking about how I say things in sort of Donald Trump sort of way. It's kind of like, I do this and it's a really good idea and it's an amazing idea. As a matter of fact, it's probably the best idea that anybody could ever have. And that I do tend to promote my ideas. If you're not promoting your ideas, then maybe you should get new ideas. That's kind of how I look at it. But that idea is that, the reason for that behavior is because these are things that I've discovered as truisms. They're not just things that work for me. They're truisms. They actually they work, and so they will work for anybody who will put them into practice. And one of the things that I've discovered is the more that you invest in other people, the more like the book that you mentioned, the more fulfilled you are. And so why would you want to spend your life in self-promotion that at best, you're going to get second place? At the very best, you're going to get second place. You can't possibly get first place, because it's just, by definition of how it works, is because because the people that should be benefiting are the ones who are ahead of you, from your life. They're the ones that are ahead of you. And so you're putting yourself out there and you're just going to take care of yourself for the rest of your life. Well, nobody's going to help you. Nobody's going to be there to promote you. Nobody's going to be there egging you on. Nobody's going to be there to provide support or help. You're going to plug away at it all by yourself, and nobody's going to help you. So you'll always be second. And if anything, people will despise you. But if you're the kind of person that's always putting other people before you, then you're gonna never lack for people to help you along the way, because they will see the benefits, that you are providing for them, and they'll want to help in that endeavor. And so it's not everybody right across the board. We're not talking about utopian, but
yeah.
But that's the idea. And so, if you want to be a really, really fulfilled individual, be a leader, but be a real leader. Be a servant leader. Which is the phrase that is used a lot. But in the better sense, it's not so much being the servant leader where you become this lowly, meaningless individual, but that you're willing to go out in the front and you're willing to take the hits. Because you're trying to help other people along. And so, when you're trying to help other people along, you're the one who's going to take the brunt of the opposition. When you're trying to help other people, look at anybody who tries to help people. I mean, if anybody can look at, well, let's not go there. That's not even necessary. But if you just look in general, you want to tear down somebody who has given their life to helping other people simply because they make difficult decisions, or they make very strong and emphatic decisions, and along the way the few get hurt so that the many can benefit. You want to kill that person because you can't bring everybody along. Well, nobody can bring everybody along. You're always going to leave people behind trying to do something worthwhile. You know, how many people are going to heaven as to opposed to how many people aren't? Is that God's doing a terrible job? You know, he's not. He doesn't know what he's doing because he can't get us all there. Well, the reality is he can't get us all there. It's just not a. It's not an option. It's not one of the choices to get everybody there. The choice is to get some there or get none there.
So is it not is it possible, but is it? Would you say it's common for people to be experiencing their own individual level of anarchy?
Say that again.
Okay, so
Only for clarification.
Okay. So let me just back my question here. So when you're talking everything you're just talking about,
Yes.
so like the difference between the two people. Some are living to serve other people. Some are living to serve themselves.
Right.
Right. And there is satisfaction in the one,
Right.
which obviously involves the issue of leadership,
Right.
and then the other one is
leading
very
help other
self-consumed,
people.
right?
Right.
And then there's this, scripture came up in my mind while you were talking about that is when in Judges. It's actually not the first time this is said, and it's not the last time it's said
About
in
the
the
tree.
Bible. No, about everybody doing what is right in their
Oh,
own
okay,
eyes. So
okay.
in that day, there was no
Yeah.
king in Israel, and everybody
yeah,
did what was
yeah.
right in their own eyes. And the book of Judges really is a book of anarchy, right? And so
Yeah, it's the headless experiment that failed.
yes, miserably,
Yes.
and tragically, in so many ways.
Yeah.
But like I was just thinking about that idea because when somebody is leaderless on an individual basis, like nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. Is it possible for somebody's life to actually have any kind of real order or purpose or direction when you're living like that?
It depends on whether you want to talk about this from the standpoint of perception or reality.
No, I'm talking about
If
reality.
we're just
This is what
talking about if we're
before
just talking about cold hard reality,
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
No.
Because we were talking about this
No,
before. and
but
I was
it could
gonna
look
ask-
great. I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
can look fabulous, but it's a shell. You know, it's not. There's no reality in it at all. These are the kinds of people that people go. They had everything and they committed suicide. I don't understand. That's those kind of people.
Yeah.
Because they've realized I have lived myself entirely for myself and I've been able to get everything that I want, and this is nothing. This, if anything, this is worse than had I just lived my life as begging on the streets. Because there's nothing fulfilling, in being selfish. There's nothing fulfilling in functioning from a selfish perspective. And that's why the only people that are any good at it are people that have mental deficiencies or mental defects.
Yeah.
Because you have to be missing
Yeah, yeah,
things in order to be able to. It's funny because it's that whole element of it's a psychosis. People that find delight in hurting other people. It's not you don't have people who are being selfish that are just functioning in society, and they get a thrill out of hurting people. So they actually go to the dark side. So it's not. There's no such thing as a person who just focuses on themselves, leaves everybody to their own ways, and amasses great fortune, not just money, but fortune in general. Just doesn't. That's not a reality. You're talking about somebody who's psychopathic or sociopathic. It's not.
Okay, so
Not a normal person.
So now, here's kind of where, and I'll just use an example from what we were talking about before the podcast. This is something. Sometimes it just works that way. I don't know why, but it could be just my mind is already predisposed to the topic. But you mentioned, we were talking about how there are some people who, it's like you could experience this level of satisfaction, but because of the decisions you're making, you never will.
Yeah.
And I asked the question, do you think it's possible that they just don't know what it feels like to be that kind of satisfied and that kind of fulfilled?
Yeah. Well, that is an issue, but it isn't something that again, we'll just put the psychopath and sociopaths out of the conversation. The we've all had the experience of what it's like to serve, and to do it the right way, and what it feels like, and in response to that, there's no doubt we've had times where we have done something for somebody and it hasn't been appreciated, and we get kicked to the curb because of it. But we also know what it's like to be able to experience a selfless, the fruit of a selfless act. Even if it's only in our childhood that we've experienced it, we have experienced it. We know what it's like, and we know it's the ideal. And again, I'm not going to keep qualifying mental disorders, but that idea is something that it's in us, but often you've got to do some soul searching to find out. And I would say anybody who's listening that struggles with selfishness, I would say go back into your don't not like clinically some weird 70s psychology nonsense about regression therapy or anything like that, but just run your mind backwards, ask yourself the question, why did I become like this? When did I decide to become self-sabotaging? When did I decide that I'm going to choose self over other people because I prefer second place? What was it that brought you there? Because that will be the reason. There'll be some reason you're protecting yourself from something. You're protecting yourself. And I find this, it's interesting, working with a lot of people over the years. I'm in the people business, being, first of all, a very active member of a congregation, and then also pastoring in different places in the world. That, it's interesting to me that it literally is people, they self-sabotage, I've seen people that, they want to do something. They really want to do something, and they know it's a good thing that they want to do. And it's funny, Jordan Peterson actually mentions this in the book, the whole idea of, the Adam and Eve, their eyes were open, and they saw that they were naked. And so they closed themselves. Something that was a positive, something that was, they had no trouble with whatsoever. Now they have trouble with, because they became self-aware. And becoming self-aware is what caused a trouble that wasn't there before. The idea, he uses the example, could you imagine standing on a stage, on a platform somewhere, being entirely naked? It's just unthinkable. Well, why? Why is it unthinkable? It's unthinkable because we have knowledge, and understanding of something that we don't know how to control. That's why, these nudist camps they're a fail, because it's not, it's not realistic. Okay, right. Don't tell me, what, that you have all of a sudden realized how beautiful the human body is. No, you're probably there for the very reason that you wear clothes.
Yeah.
And so the idea of, I've seen over the years, like I said, I've seen people, they have the ability to do something that's not in question. But the problem is it's like your son. So here's your son, he's 3 years old, right? And goes out, he's got his guitar, he's playing his guitar. And I thought, let's give this a dry run, see how he is with being in front of people. And so I put him out there, put the chord inside of his guitar like he was actually really playing. And he starts playing, and he's, Mom. He's like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. Well, he was really excited about the idea initially until he turned around and saw a crowd of people and all the sound and all the excitement all going together. And what is it? Everybody's looking at me.
Yes.
That's all he can see, is everybody's looking at me. So now he loses it. Before, he wasn't thinking about that, and everything was fine. But now everybody's looking at him, and now he can't function anymore. He can't do it. He's got to stop. And I see this, that people do this to themselves, because their self-awareness, which really, to put it in its true perspective, is self-centeredness, is their undoing. Because that's the problem, is that what are people thinking right now? If I do this, what if I choke? What if I don't do it right? What if people think, this or that or the other thing? When being self-aware comes into the mix of achievement, it stops our achievement. It stops it. It stops it cold, because you can't be focused on yourself and achieve at the same time. You just can't. What happens at the very worst, what happens, or the best, depending on how you want to look at it, is that you begin to fight against that in yourself. Screw other people. Screw what other people think. Other people aren't thinking about you. They're not that interested in you as much as you think they are interested in you in your head. And so now you're it's the Don Quixote thing, is you're fighting a windmill because your vision is not clear. And you're fighting something that doesn't even exist. And so it's going to take energy to do that. And so you're pulling away from your ability to achieve. And so if you can just simply stop thinking about what other people are thinking, or what you think other people are thinking, or why even consider the idea of anybody thinking about you at all. I'm looking at this whole scene with your son, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, that is such classic human nature, because nobody could give a fig about a 3-year-old playing a plastic guitar, except to look at it. No matter what he's doing right now, as long as he's smiling and happy, it's cute.
Yeah.
Whether there's any skill involved, whether there's anything involved whatsoever, it's cute, and that's all there is to it. And the truth is, the vast majority of the things that we do, when people look at us, they're really deciding whether or not it's cute. They're not there going, oh, revelation, oh, powerful understanding, this is a God, not a man. This is not how people are thinking. They're just not thinking that way. If you do well, if you don't do bad, then you are accepted. It's not if you get a 5-star rating. It's like 3 stars is good enough. It's 3 stars, nobody's going to say anything. If you flat bomb, okay, that's another story, because you're not prepared, you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't even be up there in the first place. That's a whole nother level. But if you're up there trying to do something and you do it, nobody's going to care. It's going to walk away and they're going to forget about it. They may remember it for a little while if it was really good, but at worst they're going to forget you did it.
Yeah.
But in our minds, because we're so self-aware, it's like, no, you don't understand. This is just, oh no, this is so much writing on this right now. It's like, that's your ego talking. That's not reality. That's your ego talking. Nobody takes you that seriously.
Yeah.
But no, in our minds is no. This is because it's always one of the things I've always marveled at is how 5, 6, 7 people can be doing a thing. And then there's one that says, no, sorry, not doing it. And it's like, okay, why? I mean, you have a diversity of people that are there. You have people from all different kinds of backgrounds, all different kinds of intelligence levels. But they're all saying, yeah, hey, this is cool. I'm not talking about, dark side stuff where people are all doing the wrong thing. I'm talking about just people doing a thing.
Yeah.
But no, I can't do that. Well, why can't you do it? Well, okay, if you have a physical defect, or something like that, yeah, I can understand. But if it's all things being equal, and you just go, no, yeah, I can't. It's like, why are you so self-aware?
Yeah.
What is motivating you that you're so self-aware that you have to keep your guard up? It's like, no, I can't. You don't understand me. I'm different. I'm unique. I'm special. I'm in a different class of human beings. Well, but all the rest of us are going to do it, and all the rest of us have, from different backgrounds and stuff like that. And we all wrestle with fears and anxieties and difficulties as well. Why are you so self-aware? And the bottom line is because we are self-centered, selfish. That's how we function. We function selfishly. And if we're not careful, that can become our motivation for everything that we do. And you can become philanthropic out of selfishness. You can become compassionate out of selfishness. You can begin to take these good attributes and think, if I do this, then I'm a good person. If I do this, then I'm amazing. and you can feel good about yourself because you've done it. But the truth of the matter is, the reason why you did it was purely self-motivated, which is not a good reason to do anything. And so that's, got to be careful of that.
So it's 8:04, and we don't have time to tell.
Oh, I was going to add, mention, we've kind of stopped like opening it up, like.
Yeah, it's true. We have.
So we should probably, encourage people. We should have done it earlier, but I just thought about it right now. I was thinking about it this afternoon as well. We really do encourage,
off-topic questions.
Yeah, questions, just period, questions.
Yeah.
And so we do reserve, after 8 o'clock, we do reserve that time for off-topic, and might find that the topic triggers something that's more side topic, not necessarily off-topic as well. And so feel free to throw those in as you feel.
So, actually, in that light, then let's just if you guys will bear just a little longer.
We can leave it 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. So there's a story you told me that actually I thought about quite a bit while I was putting this together, and it was because it was in the context of Tesla. You might remember the story. I think it was actually last week or the week before. After the podcast, we were talking, and you were telling me about this video you watched that was talking about Elon Musk and what kind of leader he was.
Mm-hmm,
and some people were positive, some people were negative, some people hated his guts and thought he was the worst man ever, deserved to die. And then other people were like, no, this was, there was something different here. But you told me this one story, and maybe you can just
about the guy,
summarize the story. The guy, the big push during the
first quarter push.
Yeah, tell that story. And the reason why, and I want to lay the foundation because I don't have to say anything afterwards. But the idea that this guy was, given a task by a leader that was legitimately, and this is not possible. Right. But he said, okay, we're just going to do this. Yeah. And goes that direction. And the thing that stuck out to me was how he felt afterwards. Yeah. And that was
and it's interesting. And okay, so let me throw that out there and then throw a couple of little bits and pieces to put context in it. But the idea was, this is a guy who's working for Elon Musk. They had a first quarter push. This was do or die. If they didn't meet their first quarter quota at this particular time, it would discourage investments and investors, and it probably would have been at least a very negative situation, because he had already thrown all of his own money into it and as much money as he could borrow into it. And so there was really nothing left but to sell air, which is what he had started doing. He was selling cars that hadn't been made yet. And now it had been a period of time where there still hadn't been a car rolling off the line. And they had, I think I think it was the first year, if I remember correctly, they had only made like 4,000 cars, and it's like they needed to come up with some insurmountable number. And they were going to do it in the first quarter. No, it was 4,000 in the first quarter, I think was what it was. And they were saying, it's impossible. We're not going to be able to do this. It's not going to happen. There's just not, they had difficulties, setbacks, things like that were going on. But Elon Musk told this manager, this is not an option. We're going to do this. What are the problems? What are the issues? Let's fix this and let's move on. And if it means that we're going to have to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then that's what it means. And they started literally, nobody had a job description towards the end of this. Nobody had a job description anymore. It was like everybody was just throwing in. And you had, HR people driving cars from one end of Tesla to the other to make room for the other cars coming off the assembly line, because they're just pushing out these cars and they're getting stuck because they don't have anybody to drive them to the other side. It's like, get off your butt. I'm HR. No, there's no such thing. Get over here and drive. And so it was that kind of a thing, and they're push. People are working overtime, and Elon Musk's attitude about this is, this isn't a choice. We have to do this. It has to be done. This has to be, and people are getting upset, and they're tired, and they're trying to work, and they don't want to lose their jobs, and he as the boss is saying, this is not going to happen. We're not going to do it. And as he's retelling the story, and he's an older guy, probably in his late 60s, is a successful, he was from another company, successful at this other company, and he said, excuse me for a second, takes his glasses off, wipes his eyes. He says, this is really deep. This goes really deep with me. And he says, we made it. And he said, as soon as that 4,000 car came off the assembly line, he said he jumped up on his desk and he called everybody together. And he said to them, he said, we didn't just achieve keeping successful Tesla alive. We have succeeded in changing humanity. And he, this is not somebody who's just caught up in the emotion of Elon Musk reality distortion. Tesla has changed the electronic car market. Period. Nobody has come anywhere near close. And the reason is because what he did in a period of time that wasn't doable by your ordinary, type of leadership. It was a very exceptional type of leadership that really pushed people to and beyond their limits. And the success of that, was felt by everybody. Because everybody who stuck it out, everybody who didn't quit, they were a part of that, that landmark moment. And it wasn't a hollow victory, because it was genuinely do or die, and it was do. And then their stock went and everything went, and they end up going public and everything. I mean, it's just it all, and now you can say Elon Musk became the richest man in the world because of that moment, but every one of those employees became one of the richest employees in that moment as well. Not just simply dollar-wise, but now they have something that is very special, because they achieved the impossible. Now they're in a frame of mind from now on for the rest of their lives. They know that they're capable of far more than what they thought they were, because they did it. And so that's the story. Go ahead with your point now.
Yeah, so the thing that stuck out to me about that was the fact that here this guy is under a leader that a lot of people didn't like. And a lot of people quit because they didn't like him. And they missed out on that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm actually like 5 minutes almost done with the book 1776. And I mentioned this. The book follows General Washington during the year 1776. This is the year that we declared our independence. This is the year that the war was at its peak, and the year that you can honestly say looked the most bleak for America becoming its own independent nation. Yeah. And so there was like this success over the city of Boston. There was this loss in New York, multiple losses in New York. And then there were like successive losses after that, all throughout the countryside. They were driven all the way to the Pennsylvania side of the Delaware River. And the British Army, this is in the bag. And actually, a lot of the American troops thought the same thing. They just took off and joined the other side or went back home. And so the forces had dwindled so far down, and so many losses had been successive that people were legitimately starting to turn on General Washington. And there were talks of mutinies, there were desertions, there were, I mentioned letters written and stuff like that. But there was this group of people who stuck it out. And the writer of this book actually mentioned some journal entries and letters that these guys had sent off to their families and stuff, saying how they felt about General Washington. And there was this, despite all the loss, despite the fact that a lot of these guys had no shoes, to the point where they actually were able to trail these guys by the blood trails of their feet. It was so bad. And so they stuck it out. They stuck it out despite some people thinking this guy's a horrible leader. They stuck it out. And these guys were the ones that won the nation. This one group of people are the reason why we're in the United States today. They stuck it out under a bad leader. But he wasn't a bad leader. No. Some people thought he was. Purely differences of thinking and stuff like that. But so now we're seeing the value of hierarchy. That's kind of what the point is here. And the value of following under that level of authority. It comes down to which was the debate of the children of Israel, which is better, to be miserably independent or happy slaves. And that's the problem, is that most people, that's the only choices that they ever see in life,
is they have the opportunity to either be a happy slave or miserably independent. And so they choose the happy slave. But what about the happy independent? That's not many people ever experience that. But that when you've had a taste of that, that transforms you. When you have a taste of what that's like. And that's why I look at, and I'm just going to throw the names out here because of their experiences. I could care less about any of the other things. Is that's why I look at people like Richard Branson, Donald Trump, Steve Jobs, are probably the top three that in my mind, because they know what it's like to be on the verge of bankruptcy and recover, because they didn't give up. They didn't give up. They had determined they were going to succeed. They were going to be successful. They didn't give up, and they became successful. At Steve Jobs' death, Apple was well on its way to becoming the company that it is today. I mean, they're Tim Cook, and hopefully he's humble enough to understand that, is that he's riding a wave that was created by somebody else. This was created by, for the most part, it was created by Steve Jobs by himself, because he had so much opposition to overcome. Same thing with Elon Musk, same thing with Donald Trump, is these are people that they created a wave, and there are people riding that wave behind them, and some of the people riding that wave are complaining about what a horrible person they are. Yeah. But they're on that wave, and they're riding that wave, because you can't help but ride it. And so the taste of what it's like to want to quit and not quit in a hard situation, and everybody's, like I said, everybody's had a taste of what this is like. That should be, even if it's just a little ember, that should be the thing you should be trying to fan into a flame in your life. Is, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to push this through. I'm not going to quit. Listen, trying to pastor a church in the Bay Area it's like trying to be a Christian in hell. I mean, it's just, it's not like you get a lot of support for that, and the worst part of it is that there are many people who are wearing Christian masks, but who are opposed to you, and they're there and they're smiling and they're looking at you and everything. And you realize, what? Their eyes and mouth aren't moving. This is a mask. It's not really who they are. And the number of times that I wanted to quit. I've been here 15 years, 16 years, almost 17. 17 this February, I think, in fact. Is that right? Do the math. Yeah, 2008. Yeah, I came February 2008, so this February will be 17 years. 17 years I've been fighting, and this battle has been harder than any other battle in my life. I pastored a church in Liverpool. I thought that was horrible, but we had a breakthrough after about 7 years. I went to Gibraltar. We were seeing some things happen. I was there for 5 years, and it was like, this is too small, too disorganized of a place. I wasn't even ever able to even gain traction, and so it wasn't as hard to walk away from that, because there was no real traction in the first place. But then coming here, and I'm on my third or fourth congregation now, and the vast majority of the people in the church have only been saved 2 years. And it's like this turnover of people and all that. And I'm thinking, wow, this is the hardest thing ever. But the thing is that, I can't quit. It's like I've written my resignation letter, put it in my drawer, like other people have done in past times, and then take it out and go, no, not yet, and then no, definitely. this time, well, maybe put it in the drawer. Let me think about it a little bit, and then no. Throw it away. But I'll tell you, in all of that, what I've become in the process, is the little victories, seeing the little victories, seeing the little things, and hearing the lives, the individual lives that have been affected by that. And we have established, the church has been established. The devil is trying to convince everyone that the church hasn't been established, but we have been able to establish. There's rock hard concrete in our church that are solid, and hungry for God to move and to work, and that's worth it, and we'll just build on that, But that doesn't mean there's not going to be opposition, there's not going to be difficulty, and that there's not going to be more defects. It's just the way of things, but the battle's not over, and it's a battle that's been worth fighting for 17 years, to me, personally, and the thing is that there's going to come a day where there's going to be that moment. People are going to go, this is working. People are coming, getting saved. God's working. People are being changed, but they stuck with it. In the midst of other people making decisions to leave, in the midst of the opposition, in the midst of the strategies of hell against their lives, and stuck it out, and their personal. Their personal lives, and oh man, it was years and years of this, and it's good to be able to experience this. It's that kind of thing. And even if it isn't, to qualify that is, even if it isn't completely in this life, there's a very real scripture in the Bible, in Hebrews chapter 11, that says that the reward, the true reward for this battle, is not in this life; it's in the next life. He talks about people, and I have prayed that prayer. He talks about those who they didn't choose deliverance because they wanted a better resurrection. And I have prayed that prayer. I have said, God, I want a better resurrection. Do not give me a reward in this life if it's going to cost me in the next life. I don't want it. I don't want success. I don't want victory in this life if it's going to cost me in the next, because that's going to be forever. And I want to make sure that my reward is full in heaven. And the experiences that I've had, the breakthroughs, the moments of hey, God has really helped me, helped us as a church, and working through, and then the price to get to that point and all those things, it becomes worth it. And it's like, I'm going to be able to spend eternity saying, this was worth it. Look at this. Look at what's been achieved. Look at what's been accomplished. And not just at a personal level for me, but people that I'm greatly looking forward to, people walking up to me saying, you came and preached here, or you were there, or you were this, and you were only there for a week and then you went away, but what you said changed my life. And to be able to have that, that's what's going to make eternity, and that, but if you're not willing to pay the price, and if you're not willing to do what's required to be, because we're talking about the idea of anarchy versus leadership. Anarchy is control, order. It's bringing things together so that something can be achieved, where anarchy is just the opposite. It's just the opening to chaos. There's no comparison to what it's like when you see the fruit of order and control as opposed to the fruit of chaos, or of anarchy, or what we call autonomy.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, we went long. Time to go.
8:22, yeah. Wow. Extra 10 minutes. So I've actually put a note
I still have tea left, but we should go.
For next week, I will remind folks for the off-topic questions, and we will give that a specific time. We'll have a cutoff, 8 o'clock. We will have a cutoff, and we will open it up for off-topic questions. Anyway, we'll be here again next week, so look forward to that. We do invite you to be a part of our midweek service. There's information that's going to come on the screen here in a second. We also do have a concert. If you're local, in the local area, it's this Saturday night, starting at 7:30. The same address that'll be on. Actually, the concert's on there now, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that information is also there. That is this Saturday, the first Saturday of February. Encourage you to be a part of that and come and invite folks. That is not going to be live streamed. It's in person only. So let somebody know about it, and we look forward to hopefully meeting you. Otherwise, being here again next week and seeing your questions online.